Nation in Conversation, proudly brought to you by AFGRI, Fort Knox, Hinterland, Monsanto, Nedbank, NWK and Sendes. South Africa has the longest wine route in the world. Kruger National Park supports the greatest variety of wildlife species on the African continent. South Africa has deserts, mountains, escarpments, plateaus, grasslands, bush, wetlands and subtropical forests. What makes you proud to be South African?
Good day and welcome to Nation in Conversation. I'm Theo Foster. Nation in Conversation is a discussion platform that was created to discuss the agriculture issues that directly and indirectly impact our daily lives. Today we talk about locally produced products and how to protect these. These products are rooibos, Karoo lamb and honeybush. You can follow us on Twitter at Nation Converse or visit the website nationinconversation.co.za. With me in the studio today, Dr. Matlo Kalaba, International Trade Economist at the University of Pretoria, and Professor Johan Kirsten, Head of the Department of Agricultural Economics at the University of Pretoria. Johan, I want to start with you. The protection, what we talk about here, what do we mean by that?
Yeah, we basically want to protect intellectual property that belongs to a community or a nation. And since we are trying to develop or protect something that is of value to a nation related to a food product or an agricultural product that ends up in the hands of consumers at a really valuable position. So the issue is, how do we protect food that is linked to culture, linked to tradition, and linked to our nation building or our nation as such. So we are trying to find a way of countries protecting that is theirs in a way.
Some international examples?
The international examples, typically champagne, Scotch whiskey, because these days you can't call something Scotch if it's not originally from Scotland. The Parmesan cheese and Parma ham are very famous international examples that originate from history and decades of and centuries of tradition in those particular nations of especially Europe.
Matlo, why would one want to own that? Why would one to have that designation? What's the value of that?
Well, as Johannes mentioned with the example of Scotch whiskey, one of the key beneficiaries are from the fact that you gain competitiveness. If a product has a particular value and it has characteristics that are associated with the region where it comes from, it has cultural and heritage with it. Therefore, that product would be known to be coming from that region. And then as a result, with more reputation built around the products, with the value adding that Johannes mentioned, the product gets to be recognized, it gets to be known. And therefore the producers, they get protection because all the value belongs to them. And in terms of competition, it gets to compete on the basis that it originates from a particular region.
It's got some specific designation that adds value.
Yeah, but there's also a danger, because that has that value, there's a danger that people want to sell it under the name without the identity and the characteristics and the true origin of the product.
So you'll have to be able to control this process. You have to make sure that what you say on the label is actually the truth.
Yes.
Yes, it's control to regulate, as Johannes said. So if you sell a product that looks exactly the same but does not originate from that particular region or geographic area, you are not, or you shouldn't call it that. And then as a result, the protection is around all those products and commodities that come from that area that have certain characteristics, it be the taste, it be the way they look and the design. So the protection is to make sure that those benefits go to the rightful producers.
And the case in champagne is a good example. I can make sparkling wine exactly the same way, but I cannot call it champagne. Only those that originate from the region champagne can call it that.
That's correct, because the whole process of the terroir, as they call it in French, the geography, the geology, the climate, and then the specific variety, and then the production process. And there's also restrictions on how much tonnage you can harvest from a particular vineyard that goes into the champagne process. So all of these rules are enforced by the producer organization to ensure that the product that was made over centuries are still today the same.
How does that differ from a trademark?
It differs from a trademark because a trademark is owned by an individual person, an individual company, whereas a geographical indication or a regional-based product is owned by a community. And it is very difficult to protect something that belongs to everybody. And you have the problems of free riding, you have the problems of fraudulent activities. So the measures to do that is very important, and in Europe they've designed specific processes through specific legislation to help protect communities' values and communities' properties.
Yeah, I wanted to add that with a trademark, you can pass it from one producer to the other, but the geographic indicators, they belong to the region. You can't pass it from one part of the country and call it the same while it is now produced, say, in the northern parts of the country. You can't. But with a trademark, you can easily do that, pass to or sell it to the next person.
A trademark is owned in the traditional sense. What we talk about here is almost a custodianship of the producers and the suppliers in order to gain value out of that.
Exactly, and the processes that are followed in order to arrive at the final product.
Why do South Africa only have 3 registered products in terms of Karoo lamb, honeybush and rooibos?
The big process started in the wine industry. So wine of origin is a very well-known process the last 20, 25 years. So it's only recently that we went into the other agricultural products because there's not a specific piece of legislation that actually helps us to protect this. So the initiative that we took with a group of producers in the rooibos and honeybush and Karoo industries was to actually put that on the table as specific geographical products that we can protect and need to protect in a similar fashion as we did with the wine industry. So now you can buy wine of origin from Stellenbosch or Paarl, but in the case of the other products, that was not on the table, and now with Karoo lamb being there, it is something signaling something true South African.
After the break, I would like to talk about other opportunities. We have a rich culture, we have a rich culinary culture, we have a diverse community, and there must be other products that lend itself to this. Nation in Conversation will be back after the break. Welcome back to Nation in Conversation. Today we talk about the quality and the origin of products. Johan, if I go to a restaurant in the UK, I can order Angus beef. If I do the same in America, I can order Longhorn cattle. That principle, how far are we away from that kind of principle in South Africa?
We already see in the retail stores that the Angus producers are trying to promote their product. You see Angus beef on the shelves. It's a similar concept than the origin-based food that we talked about earlier, but here it's a specific breed of animal that is going through the supply chain and end up on the consumer's plate. Again, the same problem is there. Can we make sure that the product is truly from the Angus cattle? Is it truly Longhorn? Or is people using the image and reputation of that breed to actually make some money? So again, those producers will have the similar protection problem, but there they will also have different enforcement mechanisms. They have to do genetic tests to make sure that the final product is of the same breed. We also think about the latest craze about the Japanese beef, Kobe beef, Wagyu beef. All of these are very interesting dimensions related to bringing a specific style of beef or meat on the plate, which then is related to a specific breed of animal. And that is similar trends that you see in South Africa happening.
The aim is clearly to distinguish yourself from a commodity, not to sell purely a commodity. But we have a rich tradition and history of various cultures, various beliefs, various way of presenting food. Surely there must be other opportunities in South Africa than only the handful we talk about.
Yes, and I think, as you mentioned, the key is to differentiate from other products, similar products that come from another area. So when you think about several products that can be produced and also be registered as originating from a particular area, there are several that I can think of from an agricultural point of view. Here in South Africa, there are Mopani worms, even though those are targeted to the less affluent consumers, but they have origin in this country.
They have a specific uniqueness.
Exactly, and they are a very good source of protein, and therefore they can be registered if efforts are put to make sure that all the steps that are needed to register, all the steps that are required to justify why they need to be registered, what is it that they have that is specific characteristics about the area where they come from. That is one of those that can be registered. You can also think about, from the entrepreneur's point of view, new ideas about sources and pulp, things that they can be combined to produce a sauce that has ingredients coming from a particular region. And then that region can be registered, or the product can be registered to be originating from that. But internationally, we have a product that is known, amarula. We do produce that. It comes from the areas here in South Africa, and women wake up early in the morning to go and fetch the fruits, and then they produce that. But that product is not registered. And that is another opportunity. Of course, you have to go through all the processes and to justify that there is uniqueness about this product, and that uniqueness is linked to the area where it comes from.
And it's an interesting story because amarula is typically a trademark belonging to one important company, big company in South Africa, but they source the marula fruits from Limpopo province and then pulp it and ferment it to make the alcohol that goes into the marula. So that's the story. So it's a very nice African story that sells the product. And amarula is now the biggest selling cream liqueur in the world and past Baileys because of the African story. But the question that we must ask is how much of the intellectual property of Africa is bottled into those bottles?
And that's where the key for the community comes in.
Exactly. And what are the benefits from the sale of the liqueur flowing to the community in terms of that traditional values and identity of marula from Africa?
Johan, you involved in this process. What is usually the steps and where are the challenges to make it work?
I think Matlo alluded to some of it in his earlier answer that, you need to identify the reputation, the identity, and to make sure that it's confined. And if it's not confined, if it's not true, and it doesn't have a beautiful, powerful story behind it, there's no value in it. And if there's no value, there's very little need to protect it. But when there's a value, and certain communities are in danger that their identity, their intellectual property can be watered down by other people, there's a real need to have legislative processes, registration, to go with the whole process to eventually make sure that the community reap the benefits. So it's a reputation process, it's a legislative process, and then an awareness process to make consumers aware of the true value and the spirit of this product.
But you can't put Karoo lamb on and then it's not from the Karoo.
You're not supposed to do that. That is the whole point of protecting it. But the other danger of doing that is that with the products of origin, there is another element of traceability, that if you consume or you find a product in the shelves, you can track it back all the way from the farm where it comes from. Now, first of all, it is fraudulent to do that if the product does not originate from there. But secondly, it violates other rules related to the copyrights, the labeling. So hence the need to protect it, to make sure that those who intend on cutting corners are benefiting from the products that are not theirs, they shouldn't do so. And then they should be dealt with. The regulations will be clear on how to deal with this. But you shouldn't call it a Karoo lamb if it is not, if it doesn't originate from that area.
South Africa adheres to the international rules and regulations in terms of, let's say, champagne and port. Do we enforce it locally as well?
Yeah, that is the agreement between European Union and South Africa. Very recently, negotiations were taking place to finalize a new agreement in a free trade agreement. And that basically specifies how European products should be protected. Not only the wine, the champagne, but now all the cheeses, all the hams, all the beers, and Scotch whisky need to be protected in South Africa on behalf of Europe. And in exchange, the three South African products will be protected in Europe. So that's the quid pro quo that comes into play.
After the break, I want to talk a bit more about the steps, how we can do it, is there opportunity, and what the benefits is if we get it right. Nation in Conversation will be back right after the break. Welcome back to Nation in Conversation. Matlo, there must be opportunities for businessmen around this. What would you define as the opportunities, and how would one go about exploring these opportunities?
The benefits for the producers and entrepreneurs in and around Soweto lie with the fact that if they are selling and they promote a product of origin, they are guaranteed of quality, that the product is certified. The product can be traced back to the producer if there are problems. And by definition, it becomes a premium product. So they will be selling a product that has those benefits. From the consumer side of view, there are also opportunities or benefits in the sense that they have the quality assured from their side. So they will also be sure that they don't have to deal with health issues related to them. But beyond that, we know that the townships, not only in Soweto, the social events include things like going to Chisanyamas, which are just the braai areas, and you should see in summer how many there are around the corners. And if you have those products, not only will you be benefiting the actual seller, but it's a South African product. We talk about proudly South African products. All the benefits now, they actually go towards the nation rather than only the seller or the producers of the good of origin. But it has job creation and other multiplier effects through that.
I think maybe just to add, a consumer is a strange species. They typically want to be different. They want to have a status element when they consume something. Drinking good whiskey and the top whiskey is very important to show that you've arrived and you have this particular status in terms of wealth and income. But at the same time, having the product that is certified, that is a different taste, is a quality product, should also be part of your status as a consumer. So you can show to your friends and say, but you see, this product, this thing has got the label on, and I can track it down to the farm. It comes from this particular farm, and I know the farm, and I can go on my cell phone and I show you the picture of the farm. So immediately that creates a status element that my meat is different than yours, and I know it's true, and it's got a story behind, it's got a South African story behind. So the status element is very interesting, and it links very nicely with whiskey at the braai area.
This process has to start somewhere. And it's not like a company where someone owns it. There has to be a custodian of sorts. Where does this process start?
Yeah, and if I may start, the custodianship is very difficult because, as we said earlier, a trademark, it's only one company, and it's got a marketing strategy and it's got its ownership fixed up. But now in the case of a community, you have to have some organization that drives the process. So in the Karoo case, it's the Karoo Farmer Organization. In the Rooibos, it's the Rooibos Tea Council that tries to take custodianship of the process, the rules, implement the rules, and make sure all the legal processes are handled, and then start with the consumer awareness campaign. And I think Matlo was talking so nicely, we should actually appoint Matlo as the custodian of the marketing program to ensure that people are aware of this important dimension of South African cultural food.
Matlo, do you think that in Europe, obviously there's lots of these products. There's regions, there's cheeses, there's various products. Do you believe that South Africa actually takes full value or takes this serious enough in terms of our products and our rich, deep cultural history?
It is not only about taking it seriously, but it is also part of the fact that we entered this area very late. I mean, our first exposure was really when we were negotiating with the EU, the free trade agreement. And we quickly realized that if this agreement has to be completed, we cannot continue to use brands like Grappa, Ouzo, the champagnes we're talking about, because the Europeans have already protected them. Then, in return, we needed to start our own products, to register our own products. Hence, even after 15 years of implementation, we only have 3 products registered. But I think from these 3, and given the opportunities that exist, so far we only talked about opportunities in the domestic market. there are massive opportunities in the international market. As I was giving examples of Amarula, if you go to the lounge, the departure lounge, everyone has a bag of that ball. And therefore, we can actually even have those in foreign markets protected under those names. So we can introduce and we can have our government actually starting to identify some of the areas, some of the products that meet the minimum requirements, and then we take the process forward in terms of the registration and so on until we have that full international status of GI
I think
product.
Matlo said it right. It's a very recent process that we developed. So it's very important for the government to get the regulations in place so that we can do it easily. So the amendment to the Agricultural Product Standards Act is a very important process in this whole development. And then export opportunities will follow. We can do more products that is truly African, South African, that resembles our nation and our culture. Just beyond the three. The three was the easy ones because they have, so the rooibos and honeybos is endemic in South Africa. It's grown nowhere in the world. Karoo lamb comes from the Karoo. There's no other Karoo. And so those are the easy ones. But even being easy, it was difficult to set the rules, to set the boundaries, to get the enforcement in place. So it is a nice exercise, a nice pilot, and it presents a useful set of rules and legislation and experiences that we can actually now take forward. But I think the business opportunities for entrepreneurs in Soweto, around Johannesburg, is huge. You know, serving true South African meals for the many tourists to the restaurants and the five-star restaurant that we talked about earlier.
Well, I'm sure that there's nowhere else in the world where on a five-star restaurant's menu you'll get pop. We have the product, we have the culture, and I do think there'll be an international market for this. Thank you very much for taking part in the program. Please join the conversation by visiting our website, nationinconversation.co.za, or follow us on Twitter at NationConverse. Until next week, from me, Theo Foster, goodbye.
Nation in Conversation, proudly brought to you by AFRI, Fort Knox, Hinterland, Monsanto, Nedbank, NWK, and Sendes.
The world is changing today. The world is changing in every way. Let's stand together, put our hands together, join hands forever. We're making it better. No matter where you are, you could be near or far away. We're singing together.